guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about art and feelings, and specifically the kind of emotional cycles that I experience with every project, and whether it's a personal project or a client project. And I started thinking about this, well, I feel like I've thought about it in different versions a lot over the years, but I started thinking about it a lot at the end of 2017 because I was really busy with client work, and I tend to feel emotions more intensely when I am stressed. I'm just more aware of them. They come up closer to the surface for me when I'm experiencing a lot of stress, and it was a fairly stressful end of the year. It was my busiest year work-wise, which was great, but I just had more than I could handle in a lot of ways. So yeah, I had the feelings and I was very aware of them. Anyway, I did some thinking, did some writing, and I feel like I don't know if you are familiar with or have heard of the stages of grief. And I don't want to be negative with like comparing the creative process to the stages of grief, but there were a lot of interesting similarities to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in and talk about how I experience these and what they are. And there's 5 stages. So the first one for me is inspiration, or maybe denial, depending on how you want to think about it. And usually this is at the beginning of a project, maybe even before I have touched pen to paper, pencil to paper, paintbrush to canvas, whatever. It's usually just the idea of the work. And so if it's a personal project, it's, when I have that first sort of moment of inspiration. And if it's a client project, it's when they first email me and I start imagining the project and the work and how it would go. And I always feel really optimistic and excited. I think, what a great idea, what a fantastic project. And I'm just, yeah, excited and optimistic. And I usually feel like it's going to be really fun, and I feel confident that I have the skills for it. And even if I don't feel super confident about the skills, I don't know, somehow I just have this sense that like it'll be okay, and I'll be able to do it, and I have what I need to get started. It's just this, yeah, this sort of, just bumped my desk, this overwhelming feeling of, yeah, inspiration and excitement and optimism. And inevitably, as I get started on the work, whether it's just a sketch or deeper into the project, at some point I will enter the second phase, which for me is disillusionment and maybe even a little bit of grief. And that's the moment usually when I have that first kind of sinking feeling of like, oh, this is going to be harder than I thought it was. And whether that's around a specific feeling of like, oh, I don't have exactly the skills that I need, or, oh, the reference material the client sent me isn't quite as good as I thought. It could be any number of things, but it's that initial feeling of disillusionment and sadness at kind of the loss of that project as you originally saw it, as this like shining, beautiful, I don't know, just incandescent thing that existed beyond. Oh my gosh, I'm getting like really epic here. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. It's that sense of loss of all of the potential from that project as you initially imagined it. And then for me, that usually leads pretty quickly into the third phase, which is this sense of frustration that I didn't have the skills that I thought I had. And so kind of that, I guess, that sadness and disillusionment, I tend to turn it towards myself, and then that becomes a sense of frustration and maybe anger that that I'm not able to do what I thought I would be able to do, or that it's much harder than I thought it would be. Usually if it's a personal project for me, that's really centered around the idea itself, and this feeling that like I'm failing the idea, or I had imagined it as just this like really beautiful thing that was full of so much meaning, and the way that I'm making it look so just flawed compared to that. And if it's a client project, a lot of the times it's like, oh, it's this frustration that I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to do it. And that happens less actually now, but when I was first getting started, it would really look a lot like me quoting the client a certain price and then realizing that it was so much harder than I thought, and I was going to have to do way more work than I thought. So yeah, that's gotten better over time, but yeah, either way, it's this kind of the turning of the disillusionment towards myself, and like a feeling of frustration at my own inadequacies or the abilities that I thought I had, but I realized that I don't. And at that point, in that third phase, that's usually when I am the most susceptible to stagnation. And I could have given that its own phase, but that doesn't always happen to me. But sometimes I will just get stuck and feel like I have to walk away for a while. And if it's a client piece, I honestly don't usually have that luxury, because there almost always is a tight deadline. But for personal pieces, I might put it away for a day or a few days, or very occasionally. This doesn't happen to me a lot, but I've actually just been now working on a piece that I had set aside for like a year and a half. Yeah, so sometimes that phase of stagnation might be only a couple of hours, sometimes it could be longer. But it doesn't necessarily always happen. Sometimes I will just like push right through into the fourth phase, which for me, this is what it is in the stages of grief, and I've just kept the same name because I feel like it's really accurate, is bargaining. And I feel that fourth stage is bargaining because that's usually when I have gone through the sadness and I've gone through feeling exasperated with myself, and I've reached this point where I just am thinking like, okay, what can I do to make this work? So that's when I'll start coming up with different approaches. You know, maybe if I have been working in one media and that's not working for me, I'll think to myself, I need to try another media. Or if I have been aiming for a certain level of detail all over and I'm not able to do that, maybe I'll start thinking like, okay, how can I strategically employ detail? Anyway, yes, this is a very pragmatic phase for me, where I'm just interested in figuring out like, okay, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to try to make this work? And that usually leads fairly quickly into, for me, what is the fifth phase, and that is acceptance and determination. So at this point, I usually find myself thinking things like, okay, you know, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. It isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, but I'm going to do this. And I just have this sense that I may not know exactly what it's going to look like, and what it looks like may not, probably will not be as amazing and incredible as I had originally imagined it, but this thing is going to come into existence regardless, and I'm just going to make it happen. And often before I reach this phase, I will cycle through several rounds of those kind of middle three phases: the disillusionment, the frustration, and the bargaining. Particularly if in the bargaining phase I come up with what I think is going to be this like really great idea that's going to save the whole thing, and then I realize, oh, actually no, it didn't quite work that way. So sometimes this doesn't necessarily look, actually I would say most of the time it doesn't necessarily look like a sequence, like a one following the other, or even a neat loop. It's much more like a spiral, and it kind of happens over and over and over again throughout the process, especially if it's a larger piece, or if it's a piece that I'm working on and it's really stretching me, it's really pushing me on some of my technical skills that I don't necessarily feel as comfortable with. So yeah, sometimes often before I reach that final phase of determination, I will have this just continuing loop, spiral of the middle three phases. So yeah, and by the time I reach that determination, acceptance phase, it can feel a little bit like resignation, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like, yeah, I mean more acceptance. And the thing that I like about that phase is that usually at that point I feel like I feel like everything that has gone wrong has already gone wrong, and even if there are more things that are coming down the pipeline, I usually feel pretty confident at that point. And it's a different kind of confidence than at the beginning of the project. The beginning of the project, it's just, I think it's like a very romanticized kind of confidence. And at this point, at the acceptance point, I just feel like I know whatever it is that happens next, I'm gonna manage to deal with it and it's gonna get done. So yeah, those are the 5 emotional stages of art making for me. Let me know how you all experience that. If you go through anything similar, please share that in the comments so that other people can read about it and feel encouraged and learn from your experience too. Yeah, and let me know, as always, if you like the video, and if you are new here, please subscribe. And I think that is it for this week. Hope you all found it helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.